equal to root bush plus I dot underscore x. And the same for y, object y will be that as well. So we also, so that's what we'll do. If bush is defined, then save it as whatever bush was. Else, if it's so else if rock is equal to undefined, then the name of it will be, object name will be rock, the x will be rock the x, and y will be rock the y. So all we need to do is copy this tree, just paste it tree, barrel, and we just do it accordingly for all the different all these different objects. So I'm just going to do that and then come back. So now I have all these things loaded here, but what you'd realize, if we have lots of objects, this list would get pretty long. So while doing this, I've just thought of a way that we can avoid that, and we can just do it in about 3 lines. So go back into um, objects, this movie clip, and in each of these objects, when you uh, attach the movie, so after we attach it, and when we set the x and y and the unenter frame, right before the unenter frame, just put a comma, and we'll set a name. So we'll say object name colon bush. But don't forget the string. So string open quote bush close quote. So of course we'll need to set this for all the objects. So this one will be bush. This will be rock. This one will be tree, and just fill it in for the others. Just remember, while giving them the names, don't use any capital letters. Make the name, whatever the name is, the exact same as what we've added it to our game as. So this is a booth, we'll name it booth. So up here for the stop sign, its name will also be stop sign without any spaces or capital letters. And then the house, and lecture. So now that we have everything with its own name, we'll be using these names for the objects. So back to scene here. Instead of having all this, let's just leave that there for now. We'll just say mgt dot data object name plus I will be equal to root dot I forgot one more thing. In the objects again, we need to set all these things. Instead of making the name bush, we'll just make the name something like object. So its name will be object that we define it as, but it will have a variable called name that will be whatever its name is. We'd use this as reference for adding new objects. And since we'll access all of them as name, we can easily uh, find all the data for saving it. And when we load it, of course, we'll have to set it back to name as well. So let's just see if we can get all these things here. This is actually something I'm trying on the spot. So we set everything as object and back to the scene. We'll say rainsfall. MDT dot object name plus I will be root and object, since all of their names will be object. It will call on whatever his name was, whatever object his name was, and it will say dot object name. So his name is object, but he has a variable called object name, which is his real name, which may be Bush. So it will set it to Bush. And then we just set object X to whatever this object's X value is, and Y to whatever this value's Y value is. This object's Y value is. So all we need to do is set his name, since all of them will be object. Just find out whatever his name is and his X and Y. So instead of using all these multiple lines plus more for all the different objects, we can just use these 3 lines and lots of different complicated stuff. So delete all this Bush is equal to undefined. So in this for loop, just set the object name object name X and Y. So let's move this, and then after that just flush as normal. So now we have it saved, we need to load it. So just copy this for loop and go into load map on the reset map Y, paste it here. And since we want to, after we load it, we'll have to attach different movie clips. Let's just copy one of these attachment clips. Group that attach movie. So select this whole line, double click it 3 times, or you can just drag to select the entire line, copy that, and back to scene in load map. Let's just place it on top here. So for this for loop, I will be equal to 10. I is less than object depth, since we define it above here already. But if object depth was set below this function, then object depth might be undefined. So we'll have to say mgt data.object depth. But since object depth is above, it's already defined, it already has a value. So we can just make the for loop object depth. And now let me attach the movie. For object depth, we want to attach movies, and according to whatever I value is, we'll attach the movie based on the object name. So since we saved this object plus this object name, which was Bush, so he is Bush, and this save file will be Bush. So just copy this here. So we're gonna attach movie and attach this, which should be Bush or whatever it is, or new name that we name it. Its ID name is Bush, or new name will stay as object, since we want to be able to save it again and call it as an object. And instead of object plus root.object depth, since object depth is like object depth maybe 15 if you've added 5 objects. So his name will be Bush 15, then the other one will be like Hey 15, and everything will be 15. So change this to I, whatever the I value is. The depth will be something we have to we have to define its depth. Since we want it, we also want to save its depth values so that it has its different depths and it will be loaded upon its different depth. So back up into save map. After we save the x and y, just make a value variable called depth, and that will be the object that I think is in the object loop. It's new depth. So the depth will be equal to the object dot new depth. And since we save the depth, we need to load it up. So since we have it as object depth, in its depth value, depth, instead of root dot object depth, it will be whatever the depth is, since we because that's what we saved it as. And then in the um, where we use the init object to define all the variables, the x value would be whatever we saved as whatever variable we call object x. Y will be the saved value for object y, and the object name will be this object name here. So we also need to give it a variable called object name since we are attaching new movie clips. And on enter frame will be object looped again, object loop. And remove this from here. So this is how we'll attach it. By the way, the reason why I gave it the save file variable object name I is because they'll have many different objects. So the save variables, it's actually mgt. It will be saved as mgt.data.object name, and I starts off at 10, so it will be object name 10 is equal to whatever that name was. Then object t.data.object name 11, object name 12. So that's what it starts as object name plus whatever I is, and I might be a very big number, and since we don't want to limit the user only to add 10 objects and have 10 save files, we can use this object name value here plus I. So just make sure the plus and the I is out of the strings, or the string will, or the name of it, if it's plus I inside here, then the name of it will be mgt.data.object name, no, object x space plus I, and that's not what we want. So don't make that mistake. This is how the objects will load after it has been saved. I doubt it will have any errors, but we also need to clear objects. So you can just copy this, just copy the for loop, and in clear objects, when we clear the objects, just say for I is equal to 10, I is less than object depth, I plus plus. The reason why I've set I as 10 in all the for loops is because object depth starts off at 10, since we can use 0 to 9 as different things. Load map here, I think we already have load map, so we shouldn't have two functions with the same name, or it may check we call the wrong function. So delete that load map from there, and when we clear the objects, just say root, and since we name all of them object plus I dot remove movie clip, because if we don't have this function here and we add objects to our game, let's we add a few objects to the game. Then when we go back to the menu, those objects will still be there and still have their functions no matter where we are. So if we create another map, they also appear there. So if we put this clear objects function, and we have the objects. When we go to menu, it removes the objects. So that if we go in again, we can add new objects. So now let's test to see if this save and load works. So go to editor, let's name it test. Width will be, let's give it 500 by 400, which is the actual size of our game right now. So create map. No, my bad. Test. It's actually 550 by 400. So create map. That's our map here. And we can press R to reset to go back to the middle of the map. And let's just make a decent looking map. So I'll add the house here and one stop sign, warning the users.